Has he struck them as he struck those who struck them? Or have they been slain as their slayers were slain? It's time for Isaiah 27. Let's do it. Hello everybody, this is Gilgamesh, and my channel's recently blown up, so welcome to everybody who's new here, my new subscribers. The channel just kind of like doubled overnight because I posted a video about Hebrew verb tenses. I don't get it, but welcome, and I'm glad you're here. This is part of my ongoing series on Isaiah. If you want to see the progression of my video editing skills, there's a whole playlist on Isaiah that starts back at the very beginning and walks through each chapter of Isaiah in detail up to where we're at now, which is halfway through chapter 27. So if you want to go back from the beginning and watch me get better at how to make YouTube videos, it could be an interesting journey. And so I'll put that link up here. Where we're at right now is Isaiah 27, and I've broken this down into 4 basic parts. Now, I've had some people ask me before, how do you know how to break this down into parts? It's a little more art than science. So, verse 1 was about Leviathan, and it really didn't go with anything before it. It didn't go with anything after it, so we kind of just put it as its own thing. Then verses 2 through 6 was this particular story about the vineyard. Then what we're going to talk about today is the third section here, which is verses 7 through 11, where we're throwing down this false altar. And then we'll come to verses 12 through 13, which is about the gathering and the return. Originally, Isaiah was written without really any punctuation. There were no chapter divisions. There were probably some paragraph markers, but these are a little inconsistent from manuscript to manuscript. And the oldest manuscripts that we have would be from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are still many centuries after the text was written. So it's hard to put too much stock into exactly where those are broken up. So when we look at the writing here, we know the whole thing isn't just one thought beginning to end. It's obviously intended to be read as different sections, and different independent poems are grouped together. Sometimes they go somewhat chronologically, sometimes they are grouped thematically, and we have to look for certain keywords and phrases that let us know that we have moved on from a previous thought to a new thought. And as I said, this is a little more art than science here. Feel free to disagree with how any of these divisions happen. They're all just our best guess looking at the text. But that said, it's not completely arbitrary. Most people agree more or less where the chapter divisions should be. Most of the time, we all agree on where the verse divisions seem to fall naturally, although sometimes not so. But when we talk about where literary units end and start, a little more dicey. Sometimes it is obvious. We'll have some sort of a introductory or superscription type statement that lets us know that we are starting a new poem or a new section, but not always. And so as we come to verse 7 here, this section starts off with 2 questions. And it's a little difficult to get any sense out of them. Has he struck them as he struck those who struck them, or have they been slain as their slayers were slain? This reminds me of something.
I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
So it's a little confusing on the first read, and it's still confusing on about the 5th read. The Hebrew text literally says something like, the striking down of the one striking him down, does he strike him down? That's actually a note from Net Bible. And it says, the meaning of the text is unclear, but this may be a rhetorical question, suggesting that Israel has not experienced divine judgment to the same degree as her oppressors. In this case, the one striking down refers to Israel's oppressor, while the pronoun him refers to Israel. The subject of the final verb, does he strike down, would then be God, and the pronoun him would again refer to Israel. And then on the second line it says, the Hebrew text literally reads, or like the killing of his killed ones is he killed. If one accepts the interpretation of the parallel line outlined in the previous note, then this line too would contain a rhetorical question suggesting that Israel has not experienced destruction to the same degree as its enemies. In this case, as killed ones refer to the ones who struck Israel down, and Israel would be the subject of the final verb, is he killed. Neither of those are terribly satisfying explanations. What is clear about this is both lines are questions, and both lines contain 3 words, each from the same root. Here are some good attempts to bring this into English. We have the literal standard version, Young's literal translation, and Smith's literal translation. I don't know that any of them are all that intelligible, but we have here definitely the idea in the first one, there's some sort of a question where we use the verb striking or struck 3 times. And then we have a question where we use the verb slaying or killing 3 times. So striking and slaying, we kind of get a bit of a theme going. We know what we're talking about generally, but it's not very clear who's smiting and who's being smitten and how hard they're getting smitten. So maybe this will clear up with a little more context. So let's go on to the next verse here. By measure, by sending her, you quarreled with her, he removed her with his fierce wind in the day of the east wind. Okay, so we start out with not a lot of help here. This word by measure, we don't know what it means. Measure is a bit of a guess. This word is what's called a hapax legomenon. It appears only once in the entire text. We think that it is related to the Hebrew seah, which is a unit of dry measure. This is basasa, which is just unusual. We get the meaning largely by looking at the Targum, and that is a later translation, and maybe they had more of an idea of what this word meant, but measure doesn't really make a lot of sense here. So we're really not sure what this word is. And then he drove her out. We have suddenly changed here, we think, from referring to a masculine to a feminine. So if our understanding is correct, we were talking about the Israelites as a collective he just in the last verse, and now the Israelites have become a she. This is not terribly unusual. Israel was often portrayed as a woman, and so referring to Israel as she is quite normal, but it is a little jarring that we suddenly switched from he to she. So this verse, we're not getting off to a great start here. It's a bit of a problem to make sense of it, but it has elements of being smitten and killed and sent away and blasted with the east wind. Okay, we're getting a theme here. We got the idea that this is not a positive thing that's happening to whoever's doing this. But given what follows, I think we can assume that this is referring to Israel in some way. Again, going to a good note from NetBible, which their notes are great. I don't really care for their translation, but their notes are great. It says, the Hebrew text reads literally in question mark. In sending her away, you oppose her. The meaning of this line is uncertain. The form basasa is taken as an infinitive from sasa, with a prepositional prefix and a third feminine singular suffix. The Masoretic text does not have a mapik in the final he, however. According to Hallowed, page 738, the verb here, the singular verb sasa, is a palpel form, which is a binyan that's a rare binyan. But Isaiah actually does love this form, so he uses a lot of palpel and similar forms. So this is not one that you're going to see on the 7 main binyanim. This is an unusual binyan here. They're suggesting in Hallowed. It's a palpel form from an otherwise unattested root, cognate with an Arabic verb meaning to gather beasts with a call. So we've gone pretty far from by measure to now gathering beasts with a call. Perhaps it means to call or to summon here, but this is a very tentative proposal. Bashelcha, in sending her away, appears to be a PL infinitive with a prepositional prefix and a third feminine singular suffix. Since the PL of shalach can sometimes mean divorce, see Hallowed, and the following verb riv, oppose, can be used in legal context, it is possible that divorce proceedings are alluded to here, and this may explain why Israel is referred to as the feminine in this verse. as opposed to the masculine in just the previous verses. So we may have switched to the feminine here to get the idea of a divorce by something. By divorcing her, you argued with her in a legal sense, and he removed her by his fierce wind in the day of the east wind. We still don't know what the by measure really means here. I don't think calling beasts works any better than by measure. By calling beasts, you sent her away. I don't get how that could help. So we still have a mystery word there, but we're saying here that possibly we're talking about divorcing her and arguing with her in a legal sense, and then removing her by a fierce wind. Now, the word wind here, of course, can also mean by a fierce breath or by a fierce spirit. But since the next line is in the day of the east wind, I think we're talking about wind here. We've got here something about smiting, something about killing, something about we don't know, possibly something about divorcing, and then being driven away by a fierce wind, an east wind, which is always a bad thing. The east wind blows in off the desert and is not good for agricultural societies. We've got the large picture pretty well, that we're talking about something bad happened here, almost certainly to Israel, and she has been driven out. But it's a little unclear. And the starting questions on this, as interesting as they are, they're obviously very poetic because he's repeating this same root word in each of the lines. Each line has the same root 3 times. It's clear that he's playing on words here, but it's not all that clear exactly what the sense is of what he's trying to say. They're definitely questions, and they're definitely using the verbal repetition to effect, but we're not quite clear on what the meaning really was. But let's go just a little further on this, and it does clear up a little bit. Therefore, by this, the guilt of Jacob will be atoned for, and this will be the full fruit of the removal of his sin. Well, now we've got some meaning here, that whatever this is about, it's going to atone for the guilt of Jacob. And it will be the full fruit of the removal of his sin. That is a strange phrase. Swapping some letters around, the word that's translated as full fruit might actually be, and this to atone the removal of his sin, making a tighter parallel with the previous line. I think that works better, and I think that some letters got scrambled in their order here, and that was what was originally there. If not, fruit might harken back to the last section, but it doesn't seem likely. But I think that what this should be saying here is, therefore by this the guilt of Jacob will be atoned for, and this will be the atonement of the removal of his sins. What is it that's going to be this? We come in here, when he makes all the stones of the altar like chalk stones crushed to pieces. No Asherim or incense altars will remain standing. Now, first we were like, wait, we're going to crush the altar? It's talking about a pagan altar. We find that in the third line there where he starts talking about Asherim. So he's going to make all the stones that make up whatever this pagan altar is, and so this is having to do with Israel's idolatry, that all of those will be crushed to powder here, and the Asherim, which was a sacred pole, often tree-like in its appearance, is going to be taken down. It will no longer remain standing. It's going to be knocked down, along with the incense altars that were also associated with whatever this pagan cult worship is that they're concerned about here. And it comes here, verse 10, for the fortified city is solitary, a habitation deserted and forsaken like the wilderness. So the fortified city is going to be turned into a wilderness. What city is this? It doesn't say. In this portion of Isaiah, we have constant reference to a sort of generic wicked city over these last few chapters. And so this may be the same city that's been visioned there, as sort of a hypothetical wicked city. It may be specifically Jerusalem, but it doesn't say that it's Jerusalem. It's just this fortified city that is going to be left uninhabited and turned into a wilderness. And we continue here, there the calf grazes, there it lies down and strips its branches. So we've got here the idea that the Asherim were knocked down, they're tree-like, and so I think this is continuing that metaphor here, that we have the sacred tree is knocked down, and the cattle are there, and they're just gnawing away at the boughs of this knocked down tree. And it sort of represents all of the idolatry that has just simply been left abandoned and wasted here, that it's now something that once was worshipped and now cows chew on. Robert Alter says that the boughs are a metonymy for the deserted town. Metonymy means the substitution of a name or attribute for the thing that is meant. For example, if you refer to like a business executive as a suit, or if you refer to a place where you do horse racing as the track, even though there's more to those things than just the clothing or just the track that they run on, those words are often substituted for the larger thing. And so he sees the boughs here as being metonymy for the entire town that is just going to be laying waste here. This word for branches is actually only used here. It's another singular word. When its boughs are dry, they are broken, women come and make a fire of them. For this is a people without discernment. Therefore he who made them will not have compassion on them. He who formed them will show them no favor. So we continue the metaphor of the tree here. After the cows get finished gnawing on the branches, they're going to dry out, and the women are going to come, and they're going to collect them and make them into firewood. Again, the idea of the once worshipped tree is now just firewood. That nobody pays any heed or any respect to it. It has lost any gravitas that it might have had. And then these last three lines here, Robert Alter notes that it seems to break the recurrent pattern throughout the rest of the poem here and acts as sort of a summary for this whole prophecy. That this is the reason for the whole thing. The people don't have discernment, and therefore they are not going to get compassion, and they will not have favor shown to them. This disaster has befallen the people because of the people's failure to see and understand God's ways. This section does end with a nice little chiasm here at the end, reordering the translation to match the Hebrew. It says, will not have compassion on them, he who made them, he who formed them will show them no favor. Now, I was thinking about separating this off into an entirely different video, but it's just the last two verses. So we're going to move on to the final section of Isaiah 27 here. And it says, and it shall come to pass in that day. This formula is part of why we think this is a separate section of the text, because that is a good introductory phrase there that tells you have reached a new place. And it came to pass in that day. So we're probably talking about something new and different that may have been grouped with the other poems because they are thematically related, but not necessarily because they are the continuation of the previous thought. So what follows here is probably its own independent thought. And the subject matter of this is considerably different than the last. And it shall come to pass in that day, from the river Euphrates to the brook of Egypt, the Lord will thresh out the grain, and you will be gleaned one by one, O people of Israel. And it shall come to pass in that day, a great trumpet will be blown, and those who perished in the land of Assyria and those who were scattered in the land of Egypt will come and worship the Lord on the holy mountain at Jerusalem. You can see it's a very different theme in this last couple of verses here. So we have from the stream of the Euphrates to Egypt's river. Assyria and Egypt were the two great imperial powers that Judah was just between them here, and they were caught in this vice between the two of them. So we're referencing both of them here, both Assyria to the north and Egypt to the south. And these were marvelously large powers in the 8th century BCE. And we're saying that this will happen all the way from the far reaches of Mesopotamia, where the Euphrates is, all the way down into Egypt, that the Lord is going to thresh out the grain and glean them one by one. He's going to harvest the grain, and he's going to go back and glean and make sure any little small kernels that were missed get caught up. He's going to get everyone, and he's going to do it very carefully, O people of Israel. And then we have again the phrase, and it shall come to pass in that day. I don't think this is a new section. I think they're just simply repeating that phrase because I think this is a sort of parallel to what we just said with the great gleaning here, that he's now using a related symbolism. But we do have the phrase again that we had in verse 12, and it shall come to pass in that day. A great trumpet, a shofar, will be blown. And those who perished in the land of Assyria and those who were scattered in the land of Egypt, this is part of why it's related here. We're talking about both Assyria to the north and Egypt as well. They're going to come to Jerusalem and they are going to participate in temple worship at the mountain in Jerusalem. The ram's horn, the shofar, was blown at coronations and to announce the Jubilee year. Here it inaugurates a grand period of renewal after national tribulations. Traditional interpreters often associate this function of the blowing of the ram's horn with the Messianic age. It mentions here those who perished in the land of Assyria. This is Isaiah that is writing after the destruction of the northern kingdom, probably, and something that he witnessed happen in his lifetime. And he may have had that destruction of the northern kingdom in mind as he talks about those who have perished in Assyria, referring to their northern kingdom of Israel, who was taken away in 722. And that brings us to the end of Isaiah chapter 27. This is the end of the section that is sometimes called the Apocalypse of Isaiah. And hope you enjoyed it. We're going to move on next time to chapter 28. And thank you, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.